So in this video, I want to talk about tracing. Now, tracing is something that I think is really dangerous in digital art. It's not exactly something that I think beginners should really be doing. And in my opinion, there's definitely a difference between drawing over 3D models, tracing your reference images for practice or whatever, and what I call laser beaming your paper is where like you're literally lining line for line, copying at everything, where your pen basically never leaves the canvas. That sort of tracing really doesn't teach you anything, and I wanted to talk about the dangers of tracing in this video. So number one, the biggest danger of tracing, in my opinion, is skill. Your skill is not going to improve drastically. It will be very, very slow. Your improvement's going to be very minimal, and a lot of it, in my opinion, from what I understand or from what I've experienced, more like, is your skill becomes subconscious, which is not good. Like a lot of the time, like I grew up tracing a lot, not other people's art, although I did do that, like many artists do. Of course, you typically stop once you grow up artistically and you wise up to what is and isn't acceptable on the internet and in general as an artist. But now that I draw things on my own and do my own things and reference other artists as opposed to copying or tracing them, I can confidently say that, one of the big things you need to keep in mind is that when you're tracing all this information, it's like you're tracing it just to get get an image out. But everything you've learned from tracing becomes subconscious to the point where you're drawing and you don't even know why you're doing certain things. You're just doing them just to do them. And that's really dangerous. That's really dangerous because then you're not actively thinking. You're not active in terms of your art. You're just going through the motions, I guess you could say. Like you're on autopilot. And you're on autopilot for what? You don't even understand what you're doing. And that's the whole problem with tracing is at some point you're going to get to a point where you really don't know what you're doing and then you're not going to understand why the artist you're copying did what they did and you're just going to arbitrarily copy them because that's what you do. And one thing I really hate is there's this whole community online dedicated to people who are like, "Oh, copy other artists in the same art style. That way nobody can tell you're tracing." Like, do you not care to improve at all? Like why bother copying other artists unless you're doing like a study, which is very, very important. It's important to do studies and it's perfectly fine to show people all the work you've been doing. Just indicate that it's a study and that pretty much covers you, and just show the reference of what you were copying. But most people who are in these communities, they hide the reference, they trace AI or whatever they do, and they learn nothing. They gain no skill. And in my opinion, one of the biggest problems with tracing is it goes back to that subconscious mindset of drawing, I call it. This is not scientific. This is just what's coming up in my head as opposed to, what's been proven. But in my opinion, when you're drawing with your subconscious mind, meaning when you're aimlessly drawing, basically, and you're relying on your muscle memory, you're going to have a ton of muscle memory from tracing, but you're not going to be able to call upon it because you didn't learn it yourself. You learned it secondhand, basically. Like you just copied another artist for so long, you're learning from the simplification that they learned, and that is like one step removed from just drawing from real life and drawing from human references, which is very important. It's something that I struggle to do when it comes to figure drawing and things like that. But to circle back around to another point that I was thinking of is 3D models. Now, in my opinion, there's no reason to connect the word tracing and then drawing with 3D models. In my opinion, we should substitute that phrase with drawing over. A lot of people don't really say that. They just say, "Oh yeah, you trace 3D models," and then it kind of diminishes the work you put into your artwork. Whereas someone who's tracing another artist does even less work than someone who is tracing or drawing over a 3D model with, bare bones and anatomy and things of that nature, or super accurate anatomy for crying out loud. As long as you're not using AI or copying another artist, who cares how you got the picture done? It just matters that you got it done, it looks good, and you didn't, you know, copy someone else or steal something. And that's the key. It doesn't matter how you get it done as long as you're not stealing or copying or infringing on other people's rights. That's what really matters. So I don't care if you trace your reference photos from ArtStation or whatever. I've done it in the past and all that. But what I do care about is you going on Twitter, downloading someone's image, and then copying it one to one, not even studying, just copying it by drawing and tracing over it. There are so many great artists that basically just do studies and they copy other artists, and I'm like, good for you. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong with people who steal other people's art and then copy it. You're not supposed to do that. Everybody knows that. And the fact that there are entire communities online dedicated to this is madness. It blows my mind away. There are so many artists or frauds, online who are hacks, you know what I mean, who don't want to improve. How can you possibly draw how can you possibly want to make art but not want to improve yourself? One of the main challenges I have personally is just drawing in general. I struggle to draw. That's why I use 3D all the time. Really advanced 3D programs like Blender and Unreal Engine and all these other things. But if you were to sit there and use a more limiting 3D model, for example, the models I'm using in this video, in this time lapse, you realize that it forces you to bring out whatever is in your mind. And I was doing these drawings primarily off of memory, off of imagination. Of course, with a little bit of reference here and there for outfits and things like that. But I was trying to base this stuff off of what I know as opposed to what I think I know. What I actually know is that, like when I'm drawing, for example, and I'm working on the face, I know for a fact when something is off by flipping the canvas, by doing all these other things. When you're tracing and you're laser beaming your paper or the canvas, you're not focusing on those things. You're not focusing on the proportions, the accuracy, the anatomy, the this, the that, the whatever. You're focused on, okay, does it look like what I just traced? Yes. Okay. Well, then post it online, get a couple likes, and then get called out for tracing and delete my account and start over. Like, it's just ridiculous. I don't know what people really I can't fathom it. The fact that there are so many people who just choose not to improve and choose actively to just copy and trace. And there's a difference between tracing, which is when you steal people's artwork and trace it and pass it off as your own, or when you steal, something that's specifically copyrighted in a certain way that you shouldn't be tracing it. And then there's a difference between tracing academically, like tracing over an anatomy photo, tracing over, a reference photo for study or for whatever. You can do whatever you want. You can quote unquote cheat as much as you want. Just don't use other people's art to do it. Just don't do it. It's not going to end well for you. And I'm so glad that that feed on my For You page is gone, because it was just flooded with all these tracing videos on how to get away with tracing other people's artwork and how to do this and how to do that. And I'm like, what are you doing on my For You page? Like, get out of here. But anyway, I just wanted to rant and talk about basically how little you're going to improve by tracing. And I think that when you're drawing, you really need to be in the moment and you really need to actively think about what you're doing. And you're not going to get better and improve if you're sitting there and copying and tracing. You're barely going to get better by tracing reference photos, let alone tracing other artists. Other artists, all you're going to learn is nothing. It is so much better to observe and look at the reference as opposed to tracing it. Because if you trace something, you're not learning anything. But if you look at someone's art and you study it and then you try to draw it on your own just by looking at it, hold it off to the side of your screen on a separate monitor, on the sub view for Clip Studio Paint, whatever, PureRef, you know, um, do that, and the next thing you know, you're gonna see improvement. You're gonna see a style start to come out of you because you're starting to do things a certain way based on your favorite artist, based on not stealing, based on referencing of, an homage to, you know what I mean? Like, it's not one to one. That is the issue. That is what I'm talking about, and that is what this rant has been about. So, just a bit of a warning. I guess I should probably have said this in the beginning of the video that this was gonna be more of a rant, but anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this video and subscribe for more.